Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very special New Year's celebratory podcast on the JP Oncoms YouTube channel. Of course, the Off Air podcast has returned, and this time to celebrate the end of 2022. With me is channel regular Sean Skur. Hello, Sean.
Hi, Joe.
And Nigel Seeger as well, another channel regular. Hello, Nigel.
Hello.
And of course, today we're going to be talking about the month of December with Maidstone. We're going to be talking about the year following Maidstone as a whole. Of course, an incredibly successful year on and off the pitch for Maidstone, commemorating the 10 years of returning home to the town, of course, as well as winning the National League South and earning promotion back to the National League. All things we're going to go into in this podcast. We're also going to talk a little bit about our players of the month or player of the month, if we can just whittle it down to one. And we're going to look at what we expect to see going into 2023. But just to kick things off, of course, 2022 was a big year for Maidstone, big year for a lot of Maidstone fans. It's had its ups and it's had its downs. And of course, today, the day we're recording this, the news did come out on the Maidstone supporters group that a long-term Maidstone United fan, Brian Mitchell, did pass away today. The news was put on the Maidstone supporters group on Facebook. If you're not on there, there's been a lot of tributes to Brian from friends and family throughout the day. So, of course, from us here on the JP Oncoms channel, myself and the boys, respects go out to his family, friends, all those affected by the passing. Of course, always very difficult, especially at this time of year, a time that's meant for celebration. Respects go out to Brian's friends, family, all those affected by that news. And another passing as well has happened recently in a larger footballing sense with the passing of Pele as well. Of course, one of football's all-time greats, arguably the greatest of all time. And that's actually going to spark the first conversation we're going to have on this podcast. So Pele, of course, achieved so much in his career, multiple World Cups, back-to-back World Cups, I do believe, as well with Brazil, and someone who has just had a massive impact on the game as a whole. And following the recent success in the World Cup of Lionel Messi, of course, securing his first World Cup title, has sparked a very big debate on who is the greatest player of all time. So that is actually going to be our first topic of today. So Nigel, when it comes to the greatest players of all time, what is it that you feel qualifies someone to be in that position? Is it just their individual ability? Is it their career success? Do you look at it as, their career span, their longevity, or do you look at it as someone who was just so good in, a shorter period of time, who performed exceptionally well on the pitch? Do you take into consideration things that happen off the pitch? What is it that makes the greatest of all time for you, and who is that for you?
Yeah, it's I think greatest of all time is that great pub debate, isn't it? The generations have been speaking about it since people first kicked to football about. It's one of those, but I think it's more subjective, really. Is what era you grew up in. I mean, if you was in the early 50s when Pele, sort of come to the fore, you have people in those days like Stanley Matthews, the working class boy who comes up through the pits and had a very long career, was playing into his early 50s, I believe. At times when we had mud churned pitches and great big heavy balls, and played in all weathers and everything like that. So you can't really span the generations as such. But for me, I would probably say Maradona. Because he's the first one that I really saw as a youngster, that you sort of, when you're first getting involved in football, and he lit up the Mexico '86 World Cup. He basically won that World Cup. I know we had hand of God goal, but in that same game you had the hand of God goal, and then you had that mazy run from the halfway line where he beat two or three players, and then slotted it past Shilton, and and generally with the great players, Pelé was probably the exception in that rule, that but a lot of the great players, they've got their flaws, which probably makes them the geniuses what they are. You looking back even in the domestic game with George Best and Gazza and players like that. What they can do on a football pitch, you can only dream of. But they're character-wise off the pitch, they've got their flaws. So it's and even the modern day. You look at Zidane. He had the biting incident in the World Cup final against Italy, and it's just I don't think you can really say the greatest of all time. It's probably the greatest of a generation, and in that respect, Messi's probably got that finally nailed that sort of argument to rest over Ronaldo and other players of this generation. But over the time, it's just circumstances really, and their upbringing and where they've come from and where they've got to, and they've all got their own story, haven't they? So, but if you're pinning me down for one player that made that initial impression on me, would be Diego Maradona.
I think what you mentioned there is probably the key to the debate, really. I mean, everybody's going to have a different opinion on it. For me, the greatest player of all time is Lionel Messi. But again, that's a generational thing. You look at my understanding of football, it only comes from what I've really seen in football. And of course, I can go back and watch the highlights of Pele and Maradona and Cruyff and players, who are so well cemented in these debates. But I'm never going to fully understand what influence they had on football at the time. And for me, the massive influence that Messi had on football, the legacy he had at Barcelona, the longevity of his career, it's been fantastic. And for me, I factor in everything. I look at trophies and, like you mentioned, Nigel, off the field things as well. Obviously, the big debate at the moment in this generation of footballers is Messi versus Ronaldo, and I mean, you know, I'm not a big fan of Manchester United. That doesn't go down too well in my books when it comes to this debate. And of course, Ronaldo's had his off the field shenanigans as well. So for me, Messi's always been that player that I just kind of get mesmerised by when I look at him play. And, even when I was really young, that's when Messi was kind of just starting to hit his kind of peak when I was first really getting into football. So, yeah, for me, it's always going to be Lionel Messi. But Sean, how about you? How do you feel about the debate?
I mean, I tend to agree with Nigel in the sense that it's, of course, subjective and generational. Um, Clearly, Messi is the greatest of his generation currently. He's obviously won a World Cup. Cristiano Ronaldo hasn't. They've both scored a shed load of goals. Both of them have their off field demons and problems, but on the pitch, two probably no greater players in the last quarter century, you would have thought. In terms of overall, though, I still would have to plump for Pele, regardless of his passing, and that putting him to the forefront for a lot of people. You've got to remember that this was a black man who came from poverty in a country where slavery had only been banned half a century beforehand. He'd managed to play his way in as one of the youngest players, to play for Brazil, to play for Santos, to then go and win a World Cup. Statistically, obviously the most number of goals, however you want to cut it, however many you think he may or may not have scored, for whatever official club records that there are or aren't. The man won 3 World Cups. Messi, of course, has only won 1. It's just it's the stuff, as you say, it's off and on the pitch that needs to be taken into consideration, and the stuff that Pele has gone through. He's one of a very small number of players that you would mention his name to anybody who knows nothing about football, and they would still know who Pele was. I think a lot of people nowadays would know Messi and Ronaldo possibly from Instagram and the days of your celebrity and personality being spread throughout the land is quite an easy thing to do because of social media and the internet. But players like Pele and Maradona were here pre-social media, and we would never have wall-to-wall coverage back in the 80s and the 90s. Probably Italia 90 would have been the first time we'd seen of football from foreign climes when it comes to World Cups at the extent that we have it nowadays. And to get their message across and how good they are, because a lot of people, even with the 86 World Cup, probably would have seen more of Maradona in the 1994 World Cups than they did in the 86 one, because Maradona ended up winning that one fairly single-handedly for Argentina. That his profile rose in that period, but with Pele and Maradona, I think they had a generation of their own. So the debate between Maradona and Pele has always gone on because they sort of dovetailed one into the other. So I get that Messi and Ronaldo's situation nowadays is very unique because it's two of the best going head to head at once. And that's been something that will probably be unrivaled again in football history for quite some time. But I just think, in terms of, the legacy that Pele leaves behind, the 3 days of national mourning in Brazil that they've got um, is a sign. I'll be intrigued to see what the mourning periods are like for Messi and Ronaldo in years to come. Um, yeah, again, like I said at the top of this, regardless of his recent passing, Pele, for me, it would have to be Pele because he'd be the one you'd shout in the park in my youth when you went to do a bicycle kick and things like that. He was just always synonymous with football, full stop. And yeah, I'd certainly put Pele above everybody else by a small margin from, the ones we've already mentioned so far.
Yeah, it's really important to say just what an impact these players have had on football. Obviously, people who don't know football always kind of look down upon how footballers are held so highly in society amongst football fans, and Pele is definitely no stranger to that. I mean, as you mentioned, that national period of mourning, I mean, they had the same national period of mourning for the passing of Queen Elizabeth, I saw. So, it's obviously quite a big deal for them that he has passed. And of course, you know, it's never great news when that does happen, but it's fantastic the legacy that he has left behind and the impact he has had on football. So it's nice to see again that three different people have got three different points on this debate, and I suppose that's what it's all about, isn't it? Everybody's going to have their own opinion, everybody's going to feel different ways about things, but something that's a little bit harder to argue against is results and facts, looking at results, and that is going to lead us on to looking back at December for Maidstone. So Maidstone, of course, in December did not have the best term of results. I mean, it was not fantastic in the league. I do believe we lost all four games in the league. We did win a game, of course, in the FA Trophy, 2-0 against Worthing. Whoop-de-doo, as you can see, Sean is so passionately celebrating here on this New Year's celebratory podcast. I see the beverage that Sean is consuming is probably declining at a rapid rate, thinking about the Maidstone form of late. We are all just having a little bit of alcoholic indulgence as well on this podcast. Not that we can advocate that for, monetary reasons in the future regarding this channel, but enjoy your New Year's celebrations as we are, of course.
Responsibly.
Responsibly, yes, indeed. Keyword, enjoy yourself responsibly. But let's take a little look back at the first game of December, the 3rd of December, away on the road to Woking. Now, against Woking, of course, we did lose 3-1, and that is a game for me which was actually quite very much there for the taking. I was not commentating this one, I was in the stands. I did watch the game from around the middle of the field, and that is for me where quite a lot of the action did happen. Maidstone actually performed really well in this game. I thought it was definitely a game where if we'd taken our chances a little bit better, we definitely could have come away with more in that game. I did feel quite hard done by losing 3-1. I know that the boys here did kind of share that sentiment as well. And Nigel, when it comes to that Woking game, obviously you've got a bit of a, let's call it a mild dislike, a slight distaste when it comes to talking about Woking. What did you feel about that game? Obviously, it was a tough one to take, but I remember on the way back we was talking about just how well we played in that game, and it was those individual errors again that just kind of come through and maybe lost Maidstone that game. So, what about yourself? How did you take that one?
Yeah, obviously going into the game, they were obviously apart from Dorking that we've played over the Christmas and New Year period, they were the last team that we were to play over that first half of the season. And they were going well in the league. They was up in the playoff places. So, both in that respect, you expected them to be, up there with like the top teams that we've already played. But in the first half, in particular, I just don't think they offered anything really at all going
Mm,
forward. I mean, the best chances were to Maidstone, I think, and then we got the goal. And from the commentary, it looked, we couldn't quite tell whether it got a deflection. It looked like because
mm,
Ross was just rooted to the spot. So, but looking back on the highlights, he just misread the shot, and he
yeah,
just made himself look foolish, really. But um, and then obviously we had the Sanford incident where he popped his shoulder out, and which was a real shame because he was going into that game having picked up the November Player of the Month for the Stones, and deservedly so. And
yeah, very much so.
he was a key to our sort of recent improvement within the month of November. Then beginning of the second half, again we had some chances. We could have gone 2-0 up. I don't think that would have flattered us at that time. And then was the same old story again. One goal leads to two, and then leads to three. It's just those times. It was kind of like a game for the season, really. You do well in patches,
Yeah,
but then you switch off, and teams at this level are just going to punish you. And we don't. I mean, the week before we obviously we spoke to it in our last pod, but we'd gone to when we were at home to Maidenhead. We did get 2 goals up in that game, and now I think we're a team at the moment that really needs to have that second goal to be in control of games. We can't control a game at 1-0. Um, so yeah, so again, it was just disappointing. Like you say, the result flattered them, but it was only sort of like a 10-15 minute period where we conceded all the goals. And other than that, it didn't really threaten us. But the position that we're in, you can have good performances, but they don't count for nothing because
yeah,
you would then hope to see them kick on in the next game, and as we'll probably talk about in a minute, it hasn't happened. So then little problems become big problems because you're then down in the bottom half of the table, or fifth and bottom, and teams go into it seeing you as easy pickings. So this was one of those, as Jay would say. It's one of those.
yeah, most definitely. And if you can hear some shouting and screaming in the background, my dad and brother are downstairs celebrating a Liverpool goal that's just gone in. So happy days. Sure, not too happy about that. Newcastle's top four spot potentially under threat, but I'm sure they'll be fine come the end of the season. But back to Maidstone, of course. And yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it really is just those dire moments of games for us, and that is a shocking goal that Leicester have just conceded. I've just seen. It was an own goal, but yeah, for me, it's just those individual errors, those points in the game where you kind of look at it and think it's not going to end well. This I remember when Woking scored the first one, and I was actually standing with Ruth Pettifer on the sidelines watching that game, and I turned and said to her, "We're definitely not just conceding one. Once one goes in, I'm never confident that Maidstone can just keep it at one. I always feel like every time we concede, there's another goal coming, and it's very rarely that we've only conceded just the one goal this season. And it does feel to me that the organisation does seem to kind of just go a bit astray at times once that one goal has gone in. And of course, that Sanford injury as well has put a massive downer really on potentially the rest of the month for December. Of course, it was quite an important factor in that game, I do believe. Obviously, when you make such a significant change at the back of the game, nothing against Merson, of course, but it's a key pivotal role in that team, the goalkeeping position, and any change to that during a game, especially when you perform so well in one half, is obviously going to make some quite influential changes. So yeah, unfortunate for me, but in the end, like you said, Nigel, you are going to get punished in this league by the better teams if you do slip up and switch off. So, Sean, do you have anything else to add to that, or are you kind of along similar lines to myself and Nigel?
very similar lines. Obviously, Nigel has Woking down as one of those who'll be there or thereabouts come April, May 2023. Like a lot of games, certainly away from home this season, there are turning points in games where you think we're comfortable, we've got this. Obviously, Eastleigh with Gavin's red card, and Woking again. It's purely, for my money, down to the Sanford injury. Everything seems absolutely tickety boo until he comes off injured. Second half, heads go down as soon as the first goal goes in, and it's just gone on from there. Really, in that particular performance, always with attacking intent, Maidstone possibilities endless. But again, like you say, as soon as we concede a goal, it just seems to be that the wheels fall off for Maidstone. So it's, like we said about the Maidenhead game at the end of the previous month, you've got a 2-goal lead. I was sat with Connor that game and the whole time just going, we need a second one, we need a second one. And even 3-1 up in stoppage time.
Exactly.
Throw another
You
one in.
always need the boundary, don't you?
Good luck, just to keep everybody on their toes. So, we certainly needed a second one, not to kill off Woking, but at least give ourselves a chance to keep ourselves ahead, or at least in the game a lot more than we were just at 1-0. So, same old, and probably going to repeat ourselves quite a bit for the next however long for the rest of the month, frankly.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, that is going to lead us into the Altrincham game, the first home game of the month, the 10th of December. And of course, against Altrincham, away from home at the start of the season, the Stones did get a 1-1 draw. It was the first second fixture of the season, if that makes sense. The first reverse fixture of the season. And of course, we do need to just talk about how Maidstone did again. Not throw one away, but did end up losing a game simply based on the fact that once one goal goes in, Maidstone can't really seem to stop themselves. And of course, looking at that game as a whole, it did kind of just tell a tale of how the season's gone. We did concede relatively early on, 20 minutes in, from Josh Lundstrom. But we did get one back through Regan Booty, a penalty. But again, Maidstone just weren't really the better team in that game. We did not have too many opportunities, but again, there were some that we could have taken to try and get somewhat of a foothold in that fixture. And in the end, we did end up losing 3-2. We were 3-1 down at one point, did do quite well to get one back, but in the end, it just wasn't enough to get anything from that game. So, Nigel, how did you feel about that Altrincham result coming off the back of what was a pretty disappointing defeat at Woking?
Right, for me, it's I don't really feel we was in the game against Altrincham. We went into it with high expectations, having been so close at Woking, and we did all right up there in the opening day of the season, as you said. But I don't feel we was ever in the game. I think they sort of played a 4-3-3, didn't they? And I think Oldclough and Newby gave us the runaround a bit. I think really, I mean, both wing backs, they were just attacking us at will, really. And once Lundstrom got that first goal, you could always feel that the writing was on the wall. And now we got the penalty towards the end of the first half. I think it was a penalty. Yeah. The letters of the law as it is at the moment. I mean, they probably did play the ball against his arm, but his arm was out against his body as he sort of turned into it. So I think what they were debating about at the time was the referee seemed to take an age to give it. So I think they've kind of thought they got away with it, but I think it was between him and the linesman.
Yeah.
In the end, come to the right decision. And Booty, to be fair, dispatched the penalty. I mean, he's become really good at our penalties. He takes them so well. He takes them into that right hand corner, and even if the keeper does guess the right way, he puts them in such a position that the keeper doesn't get to him. So it always does give me a little bit of the EBGBs when he's up, because you think Lord of Average says he's going to just miss one.
Miss eventually.
If he's going to put it into that, if he's going to put one into that area, it's such a fine margin. It's to go either around the post or just that little bit into the keeper's reach. But so far, so good. So yeah, we went into the game, into the second half, 1-1. But again, once they scored their second goal, and then quickly followed by the third goal, as you said, and the scoreline probably flattered us a little bit in that one. I think what we were saying about the Woking game, and it went the other way. I think in 3-2 probably made it look like it was a close game, but in reality, I don't think we were at the races that day. And Hack even said that in his post-match interview. There was too many players off it, which, to be fair, is unusual because we have performed better at home, especially against some of the top teams. But they set up different, and probably like the top teams, early in the season, they come down being a 3G pitch. It's sort of like just don't get beaten, set up for draw, and there you get on. But with our position now, teams are coming to us, especially those mid-table teams, thinking chance for 3 points. I think we did in the research before the game that Altrincham had only won one game before they come down to Gallagher. Well, they've won two, and they're going to target games like us. So it kind of makes it a little bit more harder. It makes it doubly difficult to get anything for games, and that's the position we're in at the moment. So.
Yeah, it's really tough, isn't it? And I mean, I commentated that one, I believe, with Fred Atkins, and it was really tough doing that commentary just because, like you say, Nigel, you could almost see it coming when they got that first goal. You kind of thought, like I said, against the Woking, once that first goal goes in, you're never really convinced that Maidstone are going to stop another one from going in. And we got one back, and obviously the kind of hopes were up a little bit. But like you say, we weren't really at the races in that game, and they looked a lot better, especially going down the wings than we did. We were getting forward, but again, just never really getting that killer ball in. And quite a few things did come out from that game afterwards in terms of players coming off. And I didn't actually see this during the commentary, but some people said that I think Christy Patterson, when he was substituted off, didn't react well at all. Same goes for Sam Corn. There were some words exchanged over near the dugout with Hakan after coming off near the end. And, that sort of stuff just doesn't always bode very well. And of course, that kind of sets a precedent going forward about, how the team reacts when the going does get tough. And maybe that's something we need to work on a little bit. I'm not entirely sure. Of course, I didn't see it, so some people might have a better idea than myself. But when it comes to games like this, Sean, playing against these teams, which, I think a lot of fans would consider teams we could or should be getting points against. Do you think Maidstone are going about these games in the right way, or do you think that maybe we should try some sort of different approach?
I don't think the approach is wrong. Certainly at home we want to play 4-3-3. We want to attack. A lot of the time, it's how clinical we are in front of goal, and there were not a hatful of chances like we've had in some other games, especially at home. But certainly there were times in this game, although we weren't in it too much, we still created enough to get a point out of this game, potentially. And obviously, with the merry-go-round of players on loan that we seem to have at any one moment, special mention to Shamar Lawson, of course, making his debut in this particular match. He was a breath of fresh air. I've always complimented Hack and Terry. Is Terry's chocolate orange? It's not Terry's today; it's mine.
Make that out of stocking.
Indeed, he's not best pleased. I've always complimented the pair of them on their substitutions last season. I will admit that a few this month, particularly when I've been watching in the stands or commentating, a lot of people around you are sort of like, best player we've had today is now coming off. Yeah. Why?
It's been a couple of times, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've had it with Dom recently, Shamar with this one, Booty in the Dorking game. There's a few players that are coming off and you're wondering why they are. And Shamar Lawson was probably, for a debut, yes, we needed a striker to come on to try and get something because we were 3-1 down at that point. So obviously we're going to throw caution to the wind. So, yes, it's having players like that available and playing them to their fullest. It might well be that he couldn't do a full 90 because it would be his first 90 in men's football from the level he come from with Millwall Youth. But on the flip side, to mention a player that Altrincham will now miss for the rest of the season in Elliot Newby. He's one that I've seen a lot online from a lot of clubs higher up. in the National League who were still sort of wanting to make contact with him and try and bring them in themselves for the second half of the season. But I believe he's gone back to his Football League club to play with them. So he's had that good a loan spell with Altrincham. The results may well have been mixed, but the performances from him in that front 3 or 4, depending on what dynamic they're playing each week, he really has been probably one of the standout players from the bottom half of the league. I'd probably put him in a top 3 of bottom half players this season in the National League. And it's players like that we've come up against, just in real glut of form. Although he didn't get on the score sheet, he did everything but score in that particular game, helped run the channels very well indeed. And it's going up against players like that in such good form that sometimes when you're Maidstone, you just got to hold your hands up and go back to the drawing board for the next one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think Newby definitely played an influential role in that game, and of course we kind of knew going into it that they had these two purple patch players in Newby and Colclough, both I think the scorers of their last 9 league goals before that game, I do believe. So we obviously knew what to expect going into that game. Unfortunately, they were just the better team. They were on top for large portions of the game, and of course, we did end up losing that one. We also did get, of course, our hopes up a little bit too much maybe for that game. Of course, Nigel did mention, of course, playing so well against Woking, going into a game against a lesser side. In Altrincham, you would hope that we'd be able to get something a little bit better from that game, but unfortunately not. And we did lose 3-2. But again, we only had a very short turnover period, a bit of a congested week or so when it comes to games in the league for Maidstone, and we did only have 3 days until we played Dorking Wanderers. Now, of course, the probably the game of the month for the neutral, probably the one of the worst games of the season for the Maidstone fan, is at least one of mine, and I think that's a tale I tell too often when it comes to Dorking Wanderers. I commentated both games last season, commentated both games this season. Sean, please don't put me on them next season if we are still in the National League. We've got to break the hoodoo somehow. We've got to do something about it. But yeah, I'm sick of seeing Dorking get one over on us. And after the game earlier on in the season and the way that went down, the capitulation really after the red card and the penalty, and of course, I mean, just how that game turned out, I just was very, very frustrating. I thought this time round, I think we were in a slightly better position maybe to get something from this game than we were last time. We were in decent form, or we'd had a couple of decent games when we played Dorking last time around, but I felt this time that we got a few players in, and Hack and Terry started just figuring out the squad a little bit better when we went to Dorking this time. And I was expecting a good game from Maidstone. I think we got a pretty good game from Maidstone. We played very, very well for the big amount of the game. And unfortunately, we did also lose that one 3-2. Now, the matter in which we did it was something which, of course, has been spoken about a lot. A post-match interview from Hakan, of course, was rather harsh, I think. It was quite critical of the team. I mean, understandably critical, yes. The throwing under the busness nature of it, for me, was a little bit harsh, but I suppose from a manager's perspective, you've got people who are on the pitch to do a job, and when they've not done that specific job, they've put the team's position in jeopardy, and it's in the end cost us the game. So I suppose perhaps a deserved level of criticism there from the manager, but I think Hack managed to get a few people on side with his response from that game. I think a lot of people were kind of looking for that kind of nature of a interview after a game, that kind of finally, I'm not going to beat around the bush anymore. I'm very displeased with this, voicing his opinion. And of course, it was ex-Stones Bobby Joe Taylor who did come back to haunt us in the end. And Nigel, when it comes to this Dorking game, how badly does it frustrate you to see Maidstone in these games perform so well for such large periods of the game and then just throw it all the way 20 minutes away from the end? Reece Greenwich probably, very much arguably, our best player since signing for the club. He's been fantastic in my opinion. He's certainly up there with the likes of Sanford when it comes to the best player since coming in. Um, just a very very silly couple of mistakes to get himself sent off, and then Maidstone are really on the back foot. These subs come on again, like Sean said. We've seen a couple of strange subs in this month of December. Maybe the management team just trying something a little bit different to try and get a result in this sort of game. But for me, just not what we were looking for. And the subs come on, as Hakan said, didn't quite do their job. But, eventually we did lose the game with 2 goals in additional time. So, Nigel, like I say, how frustrating is it for you to just see Maidstone keep doing this sort of thing?
Yeah, it's very frustrating, isn't it? And I think what made it worse is obviously Terry will do their analysis of the team before they play. They had a lot of players out, a lot of first team players out, and even midway through the first half, talking, you know, I can't remember the name. One influential player went off.
They had an injury in the start of the
Yeah,
game, didn't they?
yeah,
In the warm up.
yeah. In the warm up, that's right.
Yeah.
The centre back Ed Harris injured himself in a warm up. He's one of their better centre halves, and they had to make an unplanned substitution in the first half. I mean, he was on top. We're just finding different ways to lose games. It's just so frustrating. I mean, from where we was in the away section, we was down the side. They didn't put us behind the goal, so we couldn't really see the second yellow card of Greenwich. So you boys probably got a better view than what we did in the stands. But and coming so soon after he's already just been booked. I mean, he is an aggressive defender, and he does.
He is.
We said it when he made his debut in commentary at Knox County. He does tend to go in with his hand here. So, teams will look to exploit that. So he's got to be careful of that. But he's got such a high skill level that I think he can rise above that. But when you do things like that, but again, it was just weird substitutions. I mean, we were so dominant in the midfield and we had players on the pitch, but we didn't need to bring us, it's like a default setting, isn't it? Defender gets sent off, you bring a defender on. But we had the players there. I don't understand why we didn't bring Fowler, who was playing over on the right back, just bring him in,
Yeah,
and you're not changing
that's
your
exactly what
formation.
I said, yeah.
You're keeping three at the back, but we know the players they had out, they wasn't, and Maidstone fans obviously know what Bobby Joe Taylor is capable of because we sort of played him in that number 10 winger role when he played for us. But predominantly, he has been playing as a left wing back for them. So he was for in that respect, he was playing out of position for talking, but it's a position we know all familiar what he can do. But one of the things that we know he's not good at is having headers, and there were 2 headers at the near post. You know what I mean? And he's not, he's not the tallest of guys. It's not as if he's just going to make himself a nuisance there. Again, it's frustrating because you can see what's going to happen, and you can, it's just, and to be in injury time like that as well, it was just so gutting, And again, you had that feeling when that second goal went in, the equaliser went in. Everyone's like, shit, how long left? And when there was like 3 minutes left, everyone was saying they're going to get the winner. They are going to get the winner because they were just everyone was just going forward. And yeah, it's just it's just. But again, like I say, if you take the performance in isolation, it's a good performance. You can see the mechanics of what we're trying to do. The midfield was probably as dominant as it's been all season. We didn't look any trouble at the back. We were clearing our lines. We were winning our headers. We were doing the basics. Jack Barham had scored his goal. He was looking a threat. Galvin was looking a threat every time he came forward down the left-hand side. You could see the progress of the side, but the result was the same. And I think the most frustrating thing about that game is if we'd have won, because because we were ahead for so long, obviously you look at your live league tables, and for so much of that game, we was only 2 points behind Dorking.
Mm.
But because of that late switch, they won that game. We ended up 5 points behind Dorking, and they're only 3 points off the playoffs.
Yeah.
So it's tight in there, and you can, but because of the position that we're in, we're beating ourselves at times, and teams are taking liberties against us. There's just no way that Bobby Joe should win that header. Once is excusable, maybe twice.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating.
I was just going to say, Nigel, in terms of how you felt post-match when Joe and I were passengers with you, this is night and day. I mean, you've calmed down so much in 2.5 weeks that you've had for this to fester.
Well, I've always got a thing. I never post my feelings on any sort of forums and that on match day because I just.
It's dangerous world. It's dangerous world when you have those post-game emotions, isn't
it? Joe and I were worried about getting home in one piece. Not going to lie, because Nigel was, and yeah, the performance as a whole was great, but just those individual moments, and yeah, if I will say it again when it's my turn, but if you want to have a game that sums up Maidstone's season, that's it.
Yeah. And thing is, that's just the tail. I think that's probably the third, fourth time a game we've had like that this season. Maybe not in the same sense of just right at the end of the game, like extra time, but just looking so convincing in a game and then all of a sudden just completely throwing it away, being our own worst enemy.
What makes it even more frustrating is obviously we played them last year. We came up with them, so they're kind of on that at par with us, and all the games have been close, but we're just coming out the wrong side. I mean, we talk about Altrincham, we've not played them, we haven't got a history against them. You don't build up that sort of rivalry, but Dorking, a local-ish to us, they've come up with us. It's just
couldn't stand it, can't stand it. But we need to hurry up and say your piece because we need to move on from Dorking before we start all kicking off about it.
Yeah, quick. Yeah. Just to add fuel to the fire there, 6 goals conceded in stoppage time this season, 13 conceded in the last 15 minutes plus stoppages. It is, symptomatic of how the season has been for Maidstone. Said in commentary with you, Joe, that they were looking to bring on Frewell to replace Greenwich, who was on a yellow card, to prevent him being red carded soon after. So in that sense, the substitution made sense while we had 11 on the pitch. As soon as it then became 10, I'm fully with Nigel. We were all supportive of his comments on the night and are again tonight, is that there was enough on the pitch. There were several options. Like we said, you could have moved Galvin to left back and put Jerome in left centre back. You could have put Fowler in right centre back and put Deacon right back instead. There was plenty of options at the back to change things. And again, with the midfield being controlled predominantly by Maidstone for probably 65 of the 71 minutes at that point, first 5 minutes was a bit dodgy, and obviously the goal we conceded from Mystery Man Aleb's header across before that got converted by McShane, probably. Yeah, stands to reason. Normally him scoring for them. As soon as Booty went off, we still had our moments because I think we had another 10 minutes of Galvin before he then went off. But I think most of the midfield battles were lost as soon as Booty went. Yeah. And I think not everybody on our channel, other than me, because I'm his biggest fan out of the three of us, I think, frankly, and previous recordings will back that up. And we'll get on to Player of the Month later. You saw how deficient our midfield would be without Booty in there. He's very much an unsung hero, and I do feel that the last 20, 25, 30 minutes against Dorking showed that a midfield without Booty, he brings out the best in other players. I've said this about Greenwich making KLF and Mensa look slightly better than they are, and those partnerships building. And obviously it's the same with Booty. Whoever is in that midfield with Booty can accentuate their positives. Though that ball playing that he does and gets players into space and, winning the ball back in midfield a lot. we clearly missed that the last half an hour, and the result, unfortunately, showed that to be the case. There was a lot of willingness and running, but there wasn't as much leadership in that midfield and ball playing forward, because all the time that ball is in the opposition's defensive half, we shouldn't be worrying. And we were 2-1 up, we were coasting, we were doing well. But yet again, like we said earlier, 2-goal leads needed. Didn't have that. And then, yes, the Bobby Joe brace buggered us, frankly.
Indeed. And like you said, Sean, I mean, obviously you're a massive fan of Regan Booty, as am I. A big fan, but I have been quite critical of him this season. I think even he would admit he's not been at the level at times this season as he was last season. I don't think he's been up to that high standard he did set himself last year. But I thought in this game, actually, I think I do remember saying it on the commentary, he had been fantastic. He had had an exceptional game, and especially getting that ball out wide and up to Jack Barham, who again, someone who I've been a little bit critical of this season, not meeting the levels he set himself last season. I thought his hold-up play in this game was absolutely fantastic, and probably the key reason why we were so dominant in that game, because we could get the ball up to him, and every single time he laid that ball off, a shoulder, a header, it went straight to a Maidstone player, and that's not always happening for us. And to see both of them coming off when we're trying so desperately to hold on to a victory in this game was incredibly confusing for me. But again, we're never going to know the reasons behind it. So I suppose it's probably best we move on. And a very much uplifting result. Finally, we can talk about a win in this celebratory podcast. And of course, we did, after the Dorking game, have a week's break. On the Tuesday night, we ended up playing Worthing at home in the FA Trophy. I did again commentate this one with, I do believe, Fred, and it was a much better game in terms of professionalism. I think the performance itself wasn't as good as the Dorking game. However, I believe the way we acted and managed to see this one out was a lot better. Of course, Worthing did have their chances. It was a very open game, I thought. Maidstone definitely weren't at their best, but I think if you can not play at your best and still get a good result and a clean sheet, which is not something we've seen too much of this season, against a team who's doing pretty well in the league below, then I think, we can take something from that result. So I was pretty happy with that one. 2-0 win, not too much really to say about that game. Of course, Galvin and Barham getting the goals in that one. A nice finish from Jack at the end as well, to try and hopefully get his confidence up in the league, something he definitely needed to do. Nigel, was there anything that you wanted to add about the Worthing game? Of course, nothing really too much to write home about in that one, but a win nonetheless.
No, I think it's like you say, it's professional performance, isn't it? I mean, I do remember sort of passing comment during the game that no disrespect to Worthing, but you can tell that there was national self. That highlighted what we were saying. We alluded to with the Woking game. They probably had 3 chances and scored those 3 chances, whereas Worthing did have their chances, like you say, but because they didn't convert them, you're always going to get a chance yourself, and we converted those chances that we got. So and it just showed that level that we're at and what we're facing week in, week out.
Yeah, it really did send home the quality of the National League, I think, that game, because you can almost guarantee if that was a National League team we were playing there, we certainly wouldn't have got a 2-0 win. We may have escaped with a win or a draw, but we certainly wouldn't have kept a clean sheet in that game if there was National League forwards on the field at that time. But Sean, of course, yourself, you would have hopefully some similar reflections upon that game, probably not taking too much from it, but was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
I mean, Terry's mentioned it in post-match before. It's the building blocks, isn't it? And trying to stop ruts. We'd had 7 points from 9 at the end of November to then have 3 losses in a row to have that complete dip in form. But possibly even, playing as well as we had done in those 3 previous matches in November and coming away with 0 points rather than 3, 4, 5 potentially, with, the wind in a different direction. But I think it was more minutes for players who hadn't had as many as they would have liked, or just not been available for. And the fact that it was a win and it was stopping the rot. And obviously, we'll mention Boxing Day in a moment, and the rot set back in again. But again, just very similar to how whole of December has been, negative result, fairly positive performance for the majority of the time. And yeah, it's a cup competition. It's a few grand more in the kitty that could go on another loan player for a month or two. And we're a step closer to Wembley, maybe. But we'll come on to that later as well.
Indeed. It was also good to see the return to the side in that game as well, of the injured Henry Woods, someone who's missed a lot of this season, of course. And we also did see Harry Gandel come back in that game more prominently. Of course, he did feature right at the end in that Dorking game. And we also saw Bhivesh Gurung back in the side as well, which is always good. Had a pretty decent game, in my opinion. Nice to see someone who I think had a good few games, especially, that Aldershot one really sticks out, I think, for all of us. It's nice that we have got a squad player who can do a job for us when needing to be called upon. Of course, Solwandro Smith was also on the bench, didn't make it on despite standing there in his kit for 10 minutes on the sideline waiting to come on. But he did feature, of course, in the next game. And I'm going to leave this one completely up to you guys. I was working, unfortunately, for Boxing Day, bar humbug and all that, the Christmas spirit. Was working a full 8 till 8 shift, so had no opportunity to watch this game. Did manage to listen to quite a bit of it. And of course, we did lose that game 1-0. So we'll start off with you, Nigel. When it comes to this Dagenham game, explain to me how Maidstone performed in this game. Was this something like we'd seen throughout the last few games in December where Maidstone had performed really well but just didn't get the result? Or was this one where Dagenham probably should have got a little bit better than a 1-0?
No, I wouldn't have said. I mean, you're looking at the game as a whole, and Hack said it in his after match interview. We started the stronger and we ended the stronger, and for large periods of the game, we was the dominant team. They got their goal. I don't really recall them. It was a good goal. Or, don't take it away from them, but they didn't really threaten us after that. I mean, McCallum come on. I think he had a shot that he snatched at towards the end, and it was right at Barden. I think he did well, Barden, to come out and sort of close the angle down to sort of narrow it down. But it was a sort of snapshot. But I don't recall him too much about that. I think again, and it happened when we started off in the game with Cody Lyons-Foster playing in holding midfield role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he did that very well early doors. He was, going out to they're going to play wing backs. So they had sort of Miles Weston playing as sort of like a wing back, and he was kind of overlapping with Josh Hare as well. But what they did well in that first 20 minutes was that KLF was going across and sort of doubling up on them. So there wasn't in that space for him to run into, so they couldn't get no momentum going. But he was carrying on with his runs and setting up attacks. And, at one point he was right on the edge in the D, sort of throwing the ball around and creating chances. Greenwich went off. He had an injury, went down, and then he tried to carry on, but it was obvious that he wasn't going to carry on. So, again, they made the sub, but the sub that they brought Shamir Lawson on to be in that midfield role, and Corey Lyons-Foster then went back into the defence. And then that was the first opportunity. And I believe Adrian said it on the commentary that was picked up in the highlights that, Rome was getting outdone by Miles Weston,
Mm-hmm.
and Hack said it in his interview, they knew in the game plan that's what he likes to do. He likes to cut down the wing, cut inside and get his shot off. Which is exactly what he did,
Yeah.
So, and he blamed Corey for it, or Cody for the goal for not stepping out. But I think it was difficult. He obviously just gone back in that position, trying to adjust. And, it's always one of those, isn't it? It's very hard to pin individual players. You defend as a team and you attack as a team. And whether it's because Shamar hadn't adjusted as well. He didn't sort of get across to cover that run, and it's very difficult to stop a player when they're running at full speed. With the experience that Miles Weston's got, and he's running at full speed into the box. You've got no option. Your first option is to show him down the line, but once he's inside the box, it's difficult to put a challenge on him, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's only going to be either going to be a penalty, or you're going to be in even more trouble. So yeah, it's just one. It's just another one of those. But then after that, he was comfortable. We didn't, like I say, they didn't really create anything. Another team that's up there at the end of the table, and you sort of go there with expectations. It's going to be difficult, but they didn't play well. Daryl McMahon said that in the game. It's just about getting the 3 points. They know that we're resilient. They know that we're going to make it hard for them to play against. But ultimately, they've walked away with the 3 points, and we've walked away with nothing. And it's just frustrating. It's you're trying to think of different words, but it's frustrating. And I think again, it was frustrating in the fact that Notts County were playing Oldham, so they were taking a spanking. Chesterfield were playing Scunthorpe, they were taking a spanking, and Torquay and Yeovil were playing each other. So it was an opportunity to get some points and just get that little bit of daylight that I think we need. I think Hack says about the importance of not dropping back into that relegation zone, but I think the importance is not to be that team that's being chased down. If we can just get one place up, so that you've got another team that's potentially there to be caught, rather than us looking over our shoulders, because we're not playing with any freedom. I think at the moment we're playing with a afraid to lose mentality, and we know that we can play so much better, and everyone around you when they're watching the game, you're better than that. You're better than that. You're doing stuff. I mean, Egan, I know we praised him for the Dorking game, and rightly so. But again, he gave away a lot of balls in that second half in particular, when they was attacking the goal. They're trying too hard. You can see. I don't think that people will say on the forums that they're not playing as a team, but I think they're just trying too hard. I think they just need to relax and just play the game that we know they can. It's just everything's there. You can see Barham. His work rate. He's working the line. He's running the lines. He's running the channels. He's got a couple of goals, but we know he can be so much more than that. We know that he can be prolific. We know that he can. He's got that header in. If you get the crosses in, we're not getting the crosses in. It's sort of a bit slow, the build-up play. We're working hard enough, but just that little bit of quality in that final third that you need isn't there. And hopefully it will click. But just the whole month's been like that, hasn't it? The whole month, you can see the signs. You can in periods of the game where we're dominating these teams, but we're not getting our rewards. But they had a 10-15 minute spell tagging them, got their goal. That's it. That's what on the paper. That's what counts. 1-0, 3 points. Happy days.
Yeah, certainly. And Sean, I think Nigel's done a really good job at summarising that game there. So what I'm going to ask you is, looking at this result, what Nigel's mentioned there was obviously the fact that we are so close to that drop zone. We're just 1 point above Gateshead and Oldham, who sit in 21st and 22nd. We're currently in 20th. Their form in the last 4 or 5 games is a little better than ours, not by much, just 1 point or 4 points in Gateshead's case better than ours. Do you think that Maidstone, considering the position of the other teams, every single team below us has got a game in hand? I know you've always been a big fan of the old points on the board rather than games in hand, especially when you're down the bottom, because games in hand don't always mean a lot when you're losing quite often. But with Gateshead having 2 in hand, Oldham having 3, Torquay and Scunthorpe both having a game in hand each, what sort of position do you think this leaves Maidstone in going into this new year? Do you think that Maidstone will be able to do a little bit better? Do you think we're in a dangerous position? Do you think we might slip down into that relegation spot?
It's a very good point, Joe. So as you detailed, it's something that I've spoken about frequently, and I'm still of the opinion that I would much rather have the points on the board, not have the games in hand, because you quite rightly stated, if you're in poor form, it's very difficult to go and try and nick those points from runs where you've not got the building blocks, you're not having any form of cohesion or momentum and getting yourself up the table. I would much rather be in Maidstone's league position. I'd much rather have some slightly better form. Certainly in the next couple of games, you'd hope we'd be able to get points from both of those. Home game in front of the cameras to start the new year against Dagenham in the reverse fixture. We then go to York City, who aren't in the best of form, having just lost to Gateshead, and obviously play them again on Sunday, on New Year's Day. So then once we've had Notts County Wrexham double header, it's a huge 5-6 weeks or so, end of January and all of February, home to Aldershot, away to Torquay, away to Yeovil, home to Scunthorpe, away to Oldham, Eastleigh at home, Gateshead at home. So when you consider that's pretty much every team just above and everybody below us in that period, I said that by the time we come to April, we would want to be safe or as close to it as possible. When you look at all those fixtures, if you went on an unbeaten run post Wrexham, so from all the way from Aldershot to Gateshead, that 4.5 week period, if we could manage that, you'd probably see us somewhere, potentially double the points of what we got now. We're on 21 now. If we're on 35, 38, 40 points by then, which seems massively unlikely with the form we've shown, at the same time, you'd still think that, well, points-wise, we're most of the way to being safe and probably only needing a couple of wins, some home games, looking at the home games we've got coming those last 2 months, Bromley, Woking, Bournemouth, Barnet, Notts County, you're thinking all of those are looking for top 7 minimum.
Yeah.
I've always said the home form is going to be the thing that keeps us up. It's hoping that those games against Aldershot, Scunthorpe, Eastleigh, Gateshead, by the end of February, see us safe. So in terms of those games in hand that the others have got, they should hopefully still be in as bad a form as we are, and just hoping that we can pick something up these next couple of months to really turn things around. So still just points on the board, but I think, if there's going to be, a home defeat in there in those few weeks in January and February, if that happens, then my confidence is going to ebb away slightly. I know that Nigel's confidence is still there for the season, but I think that particular period, we're going to have to pick up quite a few shock results in the last 2 months of the season. If we have a good unbeaten run in February, then we're only going to need 1 or 2 shocks rather than, say, 4 or 5 rabbits out the hat from the last 10, 12 games, which, you're really looking for miracle working by that point. So hoping that we get that run and that the points we currently have will mean that we stay ahead of those with games in hand below us and they stay below us. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, for me, the most important thing, like you said, is just not losing to those teams. I think if we can just string an unbeaten run together, I'd rather have the unbeaten run against all of the teams in and around us than beat some and lose to some, because if we lose to some, that's always going to give them the opportunity to leapfrog us. So I think if we could just get a draw and a couple wins against those 4 teams, I think we're going to be looking pretty good. Like you say, you don't really fancy our chances come the end of the season to be picking up too many points in those bigger fixtures. So that kind of 4 to 6 weeks, mid-Jan, end of Feb, is really where we need to start kicking on. Because if we come out at the end of February and we're still 20th within a point or 2 of the drop, things aren't going to be looking too good for us. I know the other teams obviously going to have slightly better run-ins towards the end of the season than what we've got. Obviously, we've got a lot of playoff contenders come the end of the season, so we do want to just pick up points where possible as soon as possible. And hopefully, if we do manage to create a little bit of a gulf from the bottom of the table, you never know. We might actually get a few upsets in there anyway, with a bit of a pressure relief and stuff like that. And of course, we might even see Luque come back towards that point in the season when we get towards those bigger teams. So yeah, of course, hopefully he comes back ASAP. But like you say, really important to get those points in as soon as possible. Hopefully, we're going to be able to do that in the new year. So just before we talk about 2022 as a whole, of course, we glossed over it at the start very quickly, but December Player of the Month, of course, is something which was just released yesterday by the club, or not the announcement, but the voting for it. As a joke, I voted for Sol Wanjal Smith because why not? Good to see him back, of course. Had the podcast on the channel, so I've got to prop him up how I can. But in reality, Player of the Month, I think it's quite a tough decision. Obviously, not a lot to shout about in this month. I've seen a few shouts on the forums and things like that of players who it could potentially be. For me, I probably have to go with Reece Greenwich. Again, there's been a few games in there where, of course, that sending off against Dorking cost us that game. But in terms of how our chances have fared throughout this month, I do believe he's been quite pivotal to us not getting completely blown out of the water by teams. I don't think he's really been at fault individually for anything outside of the Dorking game. Of course, I wasn't at the Dagenham one, so I can't really speak to it, but I've seen the highlights. And, I just don't think that he's had too much go wrong for him this month. So for me, I'm just going to give it to him simply on the basis that he's had an all right month. What about you, Nigel? Who are you picking for your Player of the Month?
Yeah, like you say, it's difficult, isn't it, to sort of, like we've said in the summing up, there's been periods of all of the games this month that we've been in and we've looked very good. But I think for me, I have voted for Cody Lyons Foster. I think he obviously came in on loan. What was it? End of October time, mid October from Aldershot. Really get a run in the team. He played that first game and didn't look like he was going to pull any trees up. And I know he came on, I recall, in the TV game at Boreham Wood and was at fault for their third goal, I believe. But yeah, he came on when Joe got injured in the home game against Maidenhead, and all those around us were like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
of course," But I think he's been a big part. Like you said about Greenwich. I mean, I probably would have voted for Greenwich. I think said that last month. He up with Stanford last month. He was the one that was up there. But for me, just getting that sending off at Dorking blotted his copybook a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think Cody did look good in that game as well. He looked good in the home game the away game at Dagenham on Boxing Day. I know Axe come out and said that he was at fault for the goal, but apart from that, he didn't do anything. He looks like he's strong in the air. He's got a bit of pace about him. He likes to get forward. So just picking one player. That's who I voted for.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Like you say, I think Cody didn't set the world alight when he came in. A lot of people, especially on the forums, were incredibly harsh on him as a young guy that's come into the team on loan. Didn't have the best start, especially in that game against Torquay when he played. But we did keep a clean sheet, so fair play to him for as poor as he may have been. We still kept a clean sheet. We haven't done that very often this season, so he can't be that bad. But he's definitely defied expectations. I know what you mean when you say that he got subbed on and people were kind of like, oh, here we go. But he hasn't lived up to that initial impact he might have had. And I've been quite impressed with him as well. I think I quite like the partnership he's starting to form a little bit there with Greenwich. He's looking like he could be a little bit more influential on this side, and of course, like you said, he played in that holding midfield position, which seemed to go pretty well for him the other day. So hopefully we can see a little bit more from him in the coming weeks, and of course he can provide a little bit more to this squad. So Sean, what about you? Who's your player of the month for December?
Well, KLF, I do see the arguments that Nigel's putting together there, and I've always been a fan of his, especially in unison with Greenwich. But I will go against your point specifically there, Joe, and say that I wouldn't pick Greenwich for this month. He's sent off in one game, so he wiped out any good grace he had built up in that performance. He was suspended for our only win of the month as well, and then he only lasted half an hour in the most recent match. I suppose giving him player of the month would be like complimenting a vegetarian for not eating meat for 90% of the month, and then the other 10%, he literally puts his foot in it, as well as metaphorically. I've picked Booty, as I alluded to earlier in this piece. His penalties, his composure on the ball, his leadership, his forward passing, and the fact that after he left the pitch against Dorking, not just Greenwich, that's when we weren't able to get forward enough, and that cost us in that particular performance. And I stated it earlier in the piece that without Booty in the midfield, in that side, we might not always look as good as we should do, but I still feel we are always worse without him in our starting lineup. And for me, especially because it's not been that much of a standout month, and certainly the 0 from 12 in the league was certainly agreed with that analysis, that I would have to say that Booty is the best of a bad bunch for another month where we've had very little go right for us, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Like I said at the start of this podcast, um, it was kind of just picking from, it was who's had the most all right month out of everybody, because I don't really think anybody's shone. Chances are we probably would have given Sanford another player of the month if he stayed fit. Hasn't happened, so unfortunately we can't do that. And then aside from that, it's been quite a chopped up month really in terms of people who've played. Obviously, you mentioned Greenwich there missing quite a few of the fixtures. For me, obviously, I'm just going off the performances he has had. I don't think he was too bad in the games that he did play. Obviously, Booty's a good shout. He's had a very good month. Um, but yeah, for me, it was just one of those where no one's particularly hit that level. I think Jack Barham's another player who's had a pretty good month. Of course, had a few good games, got himself a couple goals in the month of December as well. But yeah, at the end of the day, hopefully we're going to have a bit of a better conversation when it comes to the end of January. Um, so moving on from the slightly gloomy month of December, it is of course the end of the year, which means it's time to reflect, time to look back on 2022, of course. And of course, when it comes to Maidstone, probably one of the best years in total Maidstone have had as a club for quite a while. Of course, gaining a league winning promotion. That's the first time we've done that in quite a long time. Of course, the last time we were promoted to the National League, we did do it through the National League South playoffs. And of course, we did celebrate 10 years at the Gallagher this year as well. So obviously, that's going to mean a little bit more to you guys, I think, than it will to me. I think you've both been fans of the club longer than myself. I was not a fan of the club back when we were outside of Maidstone. I started following the club the season we actually did win the playoff final and promoted to the National League South, or National League the first time around a few years ago. That was when I started picking up on Maidstone quite a bit. But for you, Nigel, what has this year meant for you as a Stone supporter? How has it been in terms of, looking back over the years? How does 2022 rank for you as a Stones fan? Topping it off with a title win and being back in the National League, of course, celebrating such a great period of history for Maidstone, coming back to the town. Where does this sort of rank in your years as a Stones fan?
Yeah, it's obviously up there. I mean, some supporters of clubs go through their whole lifetime supporting teams and not actually winning championships. It's certainly an achievement. I was around when we won the Ryman Prem. It would have been 2014, I believe, something around there. And that was the season that we had our first FA Cup run when we beat Stevenage in the replay at ours and in the televised game, then went up to Wrexham. So, pressure. The difference, I think, and that season was because we went so far in the FA Cup for a Ryman Prem team. We had a lot of games to catch up. Margate were the money team around that time, and I remember we chased them down and wore them down and won it quite comfortably in the end. But yeah, it's definitely up there because I don't think any Stones fan, if we were sitting here this time last year when we wasn't top around Christmas time, we'd had the Boxing Day game down at Tunbridge, which was a bit turgid. It wasn't free flowing football, and then literally the turn of the year, we just went on that unbelievable run where he was just scoring goals and you know kind of the reverse from this season. Really, I mean, we was getting away. I mean, you looking at running, we was 2-0 down to Hungerford, and we managed to find a way to win that game. And that's what we haven't got this year. But I still think, as well as bad as the season's been this last month, you've still got to remember it as a good year because hey, it's a championship winning year. Scarf behind me, goes there. It's there. It's in history. You can't take away a championship. So, it's just one for the memories, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely been a good year in terms of National League South performances. Of course, we've not quite lived up to what I think some people would have expected in the National League this year. I think all three of us probably had quite reasonable expectations considering how we were going into this season with injuries and things. But looking back on the first half of the year, at least, Sean, with that title win and the return to the ground, how has it been for you as a Stones fan this year? Obviously, we've had our ups right at the start, slightly on that down at the moment, but hopefully things are going to pick up for next year. But looking back on 2022, how's it been for you as a Maidstone fan?
I mean, yeah, it's the fact that we had a couple of years without being able to be in the ground. I remember kicking things off again with Nigel for the Hemel Hempstead match. When we got through that one, August 2021. The blip in October, November, on and off the pitch. Hakan dedicating a win to my wife who'd been poorly, and poorly is still at points. I think the 4-0 win against Dartford, he dedicated to her. Some moments like that really keep the club in your blood and how much of a family thing, a community thing it is. And then that all led into 2022. And as Nigel rightly said, the Tunbridge performance. And then from then on, the 13, 14, 15, however many games it was at home in a row to be won. Fred's madness against Hungerford, my Tonto against St Albans, yours and Nigel's liquid football against Hemel Hempstead. It was just the season that kept on giving. And I think in living memory, I think there are Stones fans that go back way longer than I do, and potentially even longer back than Nigel does. And they'll probably say it's probably the best season we've had, potentially maybe in half a century. Because I mean, some of the league titles we've won, I think it was the fifth one we'd won since we'd reformed about 20 odd years ago, properly. But I think some of the other title winning seasons, possibly late 80s in the conference before we got back to the Football League. And then you're probably looking early 70s again for when we won a title to get us up to a similar level. So, yeah, it's definitely the first half of the calendar year, rather. It was just some memories that will last for a lifetime. I still get people come up to me in the street whenever I'm about in town and just random people cry out Tonto at me. So that's something I've got until the day I'm in a ground or I'm in a dusty urn of some description, So I've, my work here is done. But, there's so many memories. There'll be so many other matches and moments and goals and tackles and things, people flying in, George Elakobe's performance in that last match and everything like that. There's just so many to pick out. And yes, we can be a bit down on the last 2/3 of 2022 for many reasons on and off the pitch. But at the end of the day, the only reason we went and won that league and got promoted last season at the start of this year was to give us a crack at the bigger boys and try and have some fun at a higher level. And for me, there is a bit of pain, but clearly celebrating a league is going to be more enjoyable than celebrating staying. But having experienced most of that as a Newcastle fan for majority of my life and celebrating trying to stay up, uh, these things can change in football, and you can dream and celebrate potentially being at the other end of a table, what you're not used to, and these things can change around. I'm not saying that Maidstone are going to go end up winning the league anytime soon, but we should still be able to celebrate being a small fish in a big pond rather than the big fish in the small pond from last season when we won the league. So there will still be reasons to celebrate in 2023 to build on what we achieved in 2022, and God willing, we will be 20th or above come April 29th, about 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Indeed. And yeah, I mean, I completely agree with both of you there. For me, 2022 as a Maidstone fan has just been a lot of things have happened that I'll never forget. I mean, it was my first season commentating for the club last season, so obviously a large portion of that would have come in 2022. I'll never forget the commentary of Nigel. I'll never forget the commentary of yourself, Sean, Tonto, and Liquid Football. And I'll never forget the day we won the league, coming up to the gantry after the game and just looking down over everybody with yourself, Sean. It's just, the emotions there was so good. And it really is stuff that I don't think I'm ever going to forget, no matter what happens with the club. We could have 5 relegations for all I care. I'm still going to fondly remember those times, and that's what being a football fan is all about. You have your ups and downs. That is football. That is part of following a club. Nobody has success forever. Even the best teams have their low points. And for me, 2022 has been a year which I can look back on and say I'm very proud of Maidstone for what they've achieved. Getting back to the National League. I've even in the low points this season, I've gone and commentated at Wrexham. I've gone and commentated at Notts County. For me, individually, these are very big things. Something that I'm very thankful for, and something that I wouldn't have got if Maidstone hadn't had the success they'd had last season and given us the opportunity to be able to even commentate for the club and have that capacity to provide everything for the fans of Maidstone. And for me, it's just been such a great year. Hopefully 2023 is going to see a bit of an upturn in terms of how recently things have been going. And I think that's just going to lead us now on to 2023 and what we're hoping to see from Maidstone. For me personally, I just want to see the club stay up. I want to see the foundations just be laid out for Maidstone to progress a little bit further in this league. I want to see Maidstone set themselves up comfortably enough to just be able to give that security to fans in terms of being able to stay up, being able to stay safe, not having to worry, removing that level of toxicity that we do have at times as football fans. Of course, when the going does get tough, of course, it always is hard to stay positive at times. And I think if Maidstone can just build on what we've seen at times this season, we can stay up and going into the start of next season, see something a little bit more positive. So, Nigel, what about you? What are you looking to get out of 2023 as a Maidstone fan?
Yeah, same as you, really. I mean, I always think that I'm a glass half full, glass half empty outlook on it. Like you said, we've played every team now, and I've seen every single game. So you look at the teams, and a lot of the teams, we've just going through the fixtures that we've got against our relegation rivals. A lot of those we've got at home, which should be an advantage. I go back to the first season when we first came up. If you remember back at that time, we didn't really start to see an upturn in the performances until we got in Reece Prestige, Stuart Lewis, and Joe Piggott. And we got them in midway through January, just before the Solihull game. We lost that Solihull game. I think it was away from home. And And then we went the following week. We went and played York, and we got a 1-1 draw at York, who were down there with us at the time. And from that point, he went on a run all the way up until sort of beginning of April, where we didn't lose a game until Macclesfield away, I think it was, a rearranged game. So, there's certainly times there, and you look at the you say the importance of staying in this league. At that time, our relegation rivals were Solihull, Boreham Wood, and Bromley. They was all in and around us, and they've stayed there. And year on year, like you say, Joseph, you just want to get to a point where year on year you prove, especially with all the money that's coming into the league. I know we sort of moan about Notts County and Wrexham, but they do bring a lot of publicity towards the league. So the focus is on the league a bit more, and it's looking, it wouldn't be out of the question the way it's looking at the moment that you could get a league next year with Ebbsfleet, Dartford, Gillingham all in it. It's
The Kent
imagine
League.
that. You know what I mean? And even you could even throw Crawley into the mix that are quite local. Really, they're only just around the M25, aren't they? So it's just the importance of staying in this league. And I think if everybody's aware of that and everybody's pulling in the same direction, I mean, we don't know where we're going to go with this squad as it is at the moment. Hack's come out in the interviews in the last few weeks and said we will stay up, and the owners have come out and said it's their intention to stay up. But Hack's no fool. He knows that if we start losing games, his job's on the line. He's not he's not going to come out and say, "Oh yeah, 1 month pressure," is he? He's gonna, but he knows that as a football manager, you're only based on your last game. As far as he's concerned, really, as good as the winning the league was, once we kicked off against Altrincham, that's a memory. It's about the here and now, isn't it? And that's what we've got to focus on. And I'm sure if it disappoints me a little bit as well, really, about crowds. And maybe that's just the fickle nature of football fans, but you've got to embrace this. We might get relegated, but take this opportunity. We're playing against teams that we've got Wrexham and Notts County that at home in this up until the end of the April. They're going to be, if they get promoted, they're going to go through the leagues, and you can say, that's like you say, that's the reward of this, playing against those teams. So embrace it, and you might just, when we play on Notts County at the end of April, they are going to be going for a title. The pressure's going to all be on them. There's going to be no pressure on us. We say it's a tough running, and on paper it does look a tough running, but they've got to come to us on a 3G pitch. Well, yeah, but you look at it.
All right, Kevin. All right, Kevin.
But you look at it and you think, you just don't know what's going to happen. So you just got to embrace it, enjoy it, and go with it. And what will be.
So Nigel, I completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, everybody needs to just kind of look at this year as, we managed to get ourselves into the National League. The whole point of it was to finally play against these big teams, the teams that do get those 10,000 fans a game, Wrexham, Notts County, just to name two. And of course, we're going to be visiting, or we're going to have them visiting the Gallagher as well later on the season. And just having those players there, having those fans there, of course, they'd be bringing significantly more than what they're going to be allocated. But, just that prospect of having so many people willing to visit the Gallagher just to follow a team that we're going to be playing. Maidstone have earned their place in this division. Hopefully we're going to be able to say the same come May. We're going to be still up in this league. And as Sean next the last of his alcoholic beverage there, Sean, what is it that you're looking forward to in 2023 for Maidstone?
Well, I know Nigel mentioned it a few moments ago, and he said, "What will be, will be." Que sera, sera. who knows? Wembley, potentially. You know, we've had a few close runs with the FA Trophy. Obviously, the Stockport game quarterfinals a few years back. We've already discussed off air before that Notts County may well put out a weakened side. I mean, I'm sure they did against Chorley, and that nearly, well, probably front fired rather than back fired, because they would have got knocked out and had more weekends to play the league games and stay ahead of Wrexham. But yeah, there's no denying that. I think Maidstone would probably prefer the FA Trophy to Notts County, meaning both sides would like to be out of it so they could concentrate on the league very quickly. But I think Notts County's need is greater to go up than it is for ours to stay up. So genuine ambition could be an FA Trophy. I think if you asked Maidstone fans and gave them the either or, you know, would you like a trip to Wembley but get relegated? I think a lot of Maidstone fans would probably think, well, when on earth are we going to have a bloody chance to go to Wembley in our sodding miserable lifetimes here in the county of Kent? And I think, you know, it's a poll you can put up after this, maybe, Joe.
It'll be going out.
Would you fancy relegation but a trip to Wembley? I know I certainly would. I would love to have the Black and Amber Army go to, you know, Wembley en masse, 10, 15,000 of us go and cheer on the Stones and end up losing to bloody Brackley Town or someone like that. You know, fuck it up. You know, so I mean that is a genuine prospect still, because all the time you are in that cup competition, you've got a chance. And you know, it's not about the prize money for the FA Trophy. It's always about the possibility of Wembley. On the flip side of that, if we're talking 2023 as a whole, I'd like to be sat here this time next year going, we're going to Old Trafford next week. I can't bloody wait, because then that's the Riverside stand built, done, and that's us. That's the ability to stay in the National League. And every time I've spoken about this in my 5+ years on Stones Live, how do we survive longer term? FA Cup third round. It's as simple as that. That is the only thing. It's not about who owns us, where the investment comes from. It's having the infrastructure. The only way that stand gets built tomorrow in a heartbeat, straight off, is we need an FA Cup third round game. We need to go to Old Trafford. We need to go to the Emirates. We need to go to St James's. We need to go somewhere where it gets packed out. We get £500,000. Bosh, that's done. That's what we need. So it's the two FA competitions that, you know, we've got a realistic chance in the trophy, and we need to get to the third round of the cup. There's still probably a large faction of the fans who would probably say, stuff all of that. We just need to stay in the National League and survive, and lose to Notts County and get knocked out in the fourth qualifying round again next season. So somewhere in there is what we need and want. I think people want the survival, but I think the club, to survive longer term, needs the FA Cup third round. That's what I believe.
I mean, if you've watched previous off-air podcast episodes, you would have seen Sean championing the prospect of an FA Cup third round draw. Connor as well, although he's not been here, has said in the background as well the importance of that, building that infrastructure, facilitating Maystone's expansion in the National League, allowing us to remain a little bit more secure, just making improvements around the ground that are going to attract fans every week, keep fans, even when the goings get tough, make the Gallagher a place that people want to be, people have to be, you know, creating that support group around the club that, you know, are always going to be there. That's what football's all about, having that fan base who are loyal through the tough times. And of course, Maidstone are currently facing a few of those. Everybody here, of course, agrees that, you know, we want to see us just outdo what we've done so far in this first half of the season. That'll keep us safe. That'll give us the ability to hopefully this time next year be in a much more advantageous position in the National League, hopefully in a few of the cups as well. Of course, when it comes to the FA Trophy and the FA Cup, runs in those are always going to be appreciated, despite maybe not being at the forefront of the playing staff and the managerial staff's minds. It's always going to go down well with the fans, trips to Wembley and the like. So hopefully 2023 is going to be a big year for Maidstone. It's going to be a year for a bit of, solidification, a bit of improvement around the ground, around the team, and perhaps around the fan base as well. Seeing the fan base grow a little bit more with, a little bit more stability around the club would be nice to see. So I think, from me at least, that is going to round off this extended podcast episode. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Of course, Nigel, have you got anything else to add going into the new year?
No, not really. I think we've covered it. Just happy new year to all Stones fans. He's hoping for another successful year with many memories created, and we can look forward to 2024 in a positive fashion.
Absolutely. And yourself, Sean?
Hopefully we look forward to 2023 first as well. But then we can look forward to 2024
even better.
So, I mean, at least you're that positive that
skip the year.
We're going to make it to 2024. Because, 2023 could be a good year, but 2024 is going to be even better because it happens. So that will be good. All things considered. Up yours, Vlad. It's been a very, very good year, and there's definitely more to come if the cards unfold the right way for Maidstone. From myself and the Skirt household, everybody here and on Stones Live and the Off Air podcast and the club and everybody in the town, much love. Hope you had a great Christmas. Have a great New Year, and see you all in 2023. Tonto, come on, you Stones.
So there is, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year, happy Christmas, jubilations all around. Hopefully we're going to see some of these celebrations over this festive period carry on into the new year following Maidstone. Of course, January the 2nd, we're going to be facing Dagenham and Redbridge again in the reverse fixture. This time it's going to be hopefully a little bit better for the Maidstone team, a little bit of a better result. 3 points on the board would be a delight going into the new year. So again, once more, thank you everyone for joining us. Really hope you enjoyed this episode. Do check out some more of the content on the channel. We're going to be doing another one at the end of January, and I'll be littering a few videos in throughout the month of January as well on my own. So again, thank you everyone for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.